When I talk about people not doing their jobs, I could start almost anywhere, but let's start with law enforcement. You saw, I'm sure, this subway shooting in New York in a neighborhood that I know quite well. This is a black supremacist, essentially. He gets on the subway. He's got a gas mask on. He releases a smoke bomb and opens fire, and it's an Easter miracle that no one was killed. But, he's on video and on social media talking about how he hates white people, he hates homeless people, he hates the subways, he's going to shoot someone. And you wonder, they say that the FBI had him were watching him, but you kind of wonder whether they were paying too much attention to this, I think, fabricated threat from right-wing militia. They're always saying, the right wing is, this is the most dangerous thing in the country. Whereas when they call a meeting of these extreme right-wingers, and they're out there and they're bad people, there's no question about that. But when they call a meeting, they can't even get a quorum going. So they had this week, this ridiculous plot to kidnap Stormfuhrer Gretchen von Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, right? And they gets thrown out of court. Well, they get acquitted. These two guys get acquitted because the feds were doing all of the plotting. They kept, engaging these guys in conversation about how they were going to, kidnap Whitmer and they were going to stage a revolution or whatever. But of course, whenever they had to do it, it was like, yeah, it's time for a beer, And it was the FBI guys going, these guys are driving us crazy. They don't want to kidnap the governor. And ultimately, they were acquitted, as they should be. They was the same with one of the January 6th protesters who was let off because he was acquitted because they had video of the police letting him into the Capitol. And there's evidence now, of course. I'm not saying it was a false flag. There were idiots there who actually did storm the Capitol. But there was a lot of encouragement from people who were planted among them, which is going to make it hard for them to hold trial. They keep talking about 200 people have been convicted, but those people weren't put on trial. They all made a plea deal because when the federal government comes after you, it's very hard not to make a plea deal. They come to you and say, we are going to put you away for 117 years, or you can plead guilty and maybe we'll put you away for a year. It's hard not to take that deal. You're risking everything because when you get convicted in federal court, you go away. I mean, the thing is, the FBI, when they do this, they are not doing their job. They are serving political purposes. They're putting political... And by the way, I'm not talking about the agents all the time. A lot of these guys are great agents doing their job, but they have to go where their bosses tell them. Their bosses are serving a Democrat Party narrative, a big government narrative, a big, dark, deep state narrative that the big threat to this country is from right-wingers, and it simply is not. And, just to throw in this other story, I'll cover this story more because it's really interesting. Secret Service guys were being corrupted. They were being hoodwinked by two men impersonating federal agents and plying them with gifts, giving them gifts and telling congressional committees and allies that the severity, of the breach has been overblown. But it's ridiculous. This whole thing, they kind of were corrupting these Secret Service agents, and they have names. They keep saying they were Pakistani or something, but they have names that make me think that they were Iranian, while our government is negotiating with Iran on this stupid nuclear deal. So that's law enforcement. And then there's COVID. There's a really interesting study that came out from the University of Chicago. And instead of just studying how many people went to the hospital, how many people died, it studied all of the effects of the lockdowns, of employment, of the fact that children weren't going to school, and just put all these effects together and ranked these states where they came out on the COVID outcomes, but also on other outcomes. And it found that, for instance, Florida was 28th in mortality, in the middle of the pack, and about the same as California, right? So Ron DeSantis, what do they call him? Ron Death Sentence? Ron Death Sentence, that's what they call him. Instead, no, he did just as well as California, where they brutalized everybody with their lockdowns. They still are, but Florida did average on mortality, but it did far better in protecting its citizens from severe economic harm and its children from lost schooling. So when you put everything together, you find out that the red states and the people who didn't lock down most of them did far better than the blue states that did lock all this stuff down. And the thing is, the people know this. The people in power know that the things they didn't help, didn't change, and sometimes made things worse. We know this. We know this because when there were Trump rallies and when there were anti-lockdown rallies, Everybody went on the news and all the government people saying, oh, these are super spreaders. This is a super spreader. Whereas when there were Black Lives Matter riots and killings and burning down of city, these mostly peaceful riots they had, suddenly they said, no, this won't spread anything. This is fine. And we know because they don't wear masks. They tell us to wear masks and they don't wear masks. They just extended the mask mandate on planes. My son, Spencer Klavan, no relation, says if you want to know what it'll be like when the federal government is running everything, get on a plane, because planes are now the lousy service, bad food, and you have to wear these horribly uncomfortable masks. And Jen Psaki said, with the mask, we're just following the science. Here's what she told a reporter.
Why 2 weeks?
Sure.
What difference can be made in such a short amount of time?
Sure. Well, this assessment was made. I know there was a statement that was put out by the CDC and certainly would point to that. But as they're continuing to monitor the spread of BA2, the BA2 subvariant, which now makes up more than 85% of U.S. cases, what they're looking at is that since early April, there's been increases in the 7-day moving average of the cases in the United States. So what they're trying to do is give a little bit more time to assess its potential impact, the rise of the cases have on severe disease, including hospitalizations and deaths, and the healthcare system capacity. And their assessment from a medical standpoint, a data gathering standpoint, is that 2 weeks would give them some additional time to do that. Now, at the end of that 2 weeks, they can determine what's next after that. But that is that assessment they made so that they could gather more data of the rise of the subvariant.
So then she was asked, Ketanji Brown Jackson was sworn in, Supreme Court Justice. Why wasn't Kamala Harris wearing a mask during the ceremony?
You said on Friday that the vice president was masked indoors all day, but the White House tweeted a video showing her standing over the president without a mask on. Can you explain what happened there?
Well, I would say that the vice president and the president and all of us abide by what the CDC protocols are. It was an emotional day. It was a historic day. And there were moments when she was not wearing a mask inside, including in a photo. But she was wearing it 99.9% of the time.
So if it's a historic day and an emotional day, then the masks don't work. See, then the masks suddenly, that the historic emotion just permeates the mask and they become, so you might as well just take them off. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense, and they know it's nonsense. And look, I'm not saying that in a locked door, a locked room study or something like this, I'm not saying that the masks don't do anything when they study it like that. But in fact, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And we know, so they're not doing their jobs. They don't wear the mask when they go out. They keep making excuses for it. Fauci was talking about lockdowns in China. And here's what he just admitted it on air.
China has a number of problems, two of which are that their complete lockdown, which was their approach, a strictest lockdown that you'd never be able to implement in the United States. Although that prevents the spread of infection, and remember early on, they were saying, and I think accurately, that they were doing better than almost anybody else. But lockdown has its consequences. You use lockdowns to get people vaccinated so that when you open up, you won't have a surge of infections because you're dealing with an immunologically naive population to the virus because they've not really been exposed because of the lockdown.
So, in other words, it's a coercive technique. Lockdowns are a coercive technique to get you to get vaccinated. That's not doing your job. This guy's job is to tell people the facts so that people in a free country can make their own decisions. That's his job. So everything they do, they know that they're not doing their job. They know that the stuff they're pushing on you is meaningless because they're not following it. They're not only not following it, they make excuses for not following it when it serves their political purposes. The guy who's telling the truth, Ron DeSantis. I mean, the guy is a boss, and he's run his state. He has gotten his state to do very well to do middling well in terms of the mortality from the disease, but to do extremely well in terms of all the other damaging things that were not because of the disease, but because of government action. And he points out this same fact that it's two things. They're not doing their job because their job is to inform us of what the facts are so we can make decisions for ourselves. That's their actual job. And they know they're not doing their job. They know what they're doing is garbage. Here's DeSantis.
You look over the last 2 years, there's a cottage industry that was developed of lockdown politicians and media personalities who would either impose or support lockdown policies in their jurisdictions or advocated on their TV shows, criticize Florida mercilessly, and then the first chance they get to get out from under the yoke of those bad policies, you see them in Miami or Palm Beach or all these other places. And if I had $1 for every lockdown politician that escaped their own policies to come to our free state, I would be set for life. That's just a fact. Now, some people will say, oh, they're hypocrites, all this stuff. Yeah, they are, but that's not the issue. The issue is if they thought their policies really were necessary and these mitigations really were effective, they would be abiding by it. They're not abiding by it because they know it's all about politics and control.
All right, so he says it's about politics and control, but the point remains the same, that they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not doing effective work. They're not going to work every day like I go to work, like you go to work every day and saying, I got to do my job with excellence. They are just lying and doing this, and they know it, So we know there's something else that must be happening. There must be something else on their minds. Let's move on to our friends in the press. Ketanji Brown Jackson is sworn in. Here's how it was covered by our press. This is from our friends at Grabian.
The court looks more like America today.
Let me just go ahead and speak for all black women in America today, saying we are extremely proud.
To all the colored girls who considered shaping justice when this system was not enough, this moment is ours.
It's historical, monumental, and we're saying it, but in some ways you're like, it's 2022. How do we not have a black woman on this court already? And now this was a step towards the court actually looking like a reflection of the country it oversees.
It is a powerful symbol to look up on that court and see somebody that looks like you.
Finally, there'll be people going in front of the court looking like me and seeing someone that looks like them.
The president made note of the sunshine today that is pouring down on the White House, saying that the sun is shining for black women and women of color.
To see the president up there standing next to these two remarkable black women, both the first in their roles, it is an image that will be hard for many to forget.
Not your job. It is not your job to sell the president, to sell the Supreme Court justice. She may be crap on the court. We don't know yet. I think she's going to be very, very bad, but we know she's going to have a point of view. The color of her skin doesn't matter a damn to me. There's already a black judge on the court, but he doesn't count because he doesn't agree with them. I'm just lay aside the bias, lay aside the corruption, lay aside the intellectual corruption. They're just not doing what they're paid to do, what we turn them on to hear, which is the news. The facts will decide, as Fox News always says, they should report, we should decide. Meanwhile, of course, Hunter Biden, here's a story from the country's paper of record, the New York Post. Hunter Biden's access to lucrative financial opportunities came with expectations, including kicking back as much as 50% of his earnings to his father. Text message on his old laptop show. This story has been around, but they're just re-reporting it. Here's a Hunter Biden communication. He says, I hope you all can do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. It's really hard, but don't worry. Unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. Pop is Joe Biden. The laptop, infamously abandoned at a Delaware repair shop, does not contain any direct evidence of such money transfers, but does show that Hunter was routinely on the hook for his father's household expenses while Joe Biden was vice president. The expenses are spelled out in an email to Hunter from business partner Eric Schwerin from June 5th, 2010, entitled JRB Bills. Joe Biden bills. They concern the upkeep of Joe Biden's palatial lakefront home in the wealthy Greenville enclave of Wilmington, Delaware. JBR are President Biden's initials. So it goes on just to talk about the fact that Hunter Biden is paying this stuff with his influence peddling money, his ill-gotten gains. So they're not doing their job. They're too busy telling us what we should feel, what we should think, that we should feel and think like them, who basically are the representatives of big corporations, and I'll get to that in just a second. Meanwhile, they asked Brian Stelter at that U of Chicago thing on disinformation. They asked him about all the stuff that CNN covers up. This is just a college kid asking Stelter a question.
You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation. But CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Salmon as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative?
I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN. And with regards to the regime, I think you mean the President Biden. The last time I spoke with a Biden aide, we yelled at each other. So that's the reality of the news business that people don't see, that people don't hear. They imagine that it's a situation that simply is not. But I think your question, it speaks to the failure of journalism to show our work and show the reality of how our profession operates. We have a lot of work to do, I think.
He doesn't respond at all to the question. We're such nice people, and sometimes we get in arguments with Joe Biden's, they hide the news. They hide the news, and Stelter knows. He knows. This is the thing. They're not doing their job. They know they're not doing their job, but they think something is more important than doing their job. Just moving on to another place, these teachers that I've been ranting about now for 2 weeks, trying to teach sex to our kids, their particular sexual orientation to little kids. Here's a kindergarten teacher explaining his sad life to these little children.
I'm a man, but when I was a baby, the doctors told my parents I was a girl. And so my parents gave me a name that girls typically have and bought me clothes that girls typically wear. And until I was 18 years old, everyone thought I was a girl. And this was super, super uncomfortable for me because I knew that wasn't right. The way I like to describe it is like wearing a super itchy sweater. The longer you wear it, the itchier it gets. And the only way to make the itching stop is to have everyone see and know the person that you really are.
So that's from Libs of TikTok, which was knocked off Twitter because Twitter isn't doing its job, which is allowing Americans to talk to one another. That's why they're so panicked that Elon Musk, who knows something about doing his job, who does do his job, he wants to take over Twitter and make it a bastion of free speech, and they're absolutely terrified. But meanwhile, that guy is telling that to kindergartens. Meanwhile, I went back to a pre-COVID study of how America is doing in terms of math ability, science literacy, and reading skills, okay? And we are really way down there. The U.S. is 38th out of 71 countries. 38th out of 71 countries. He's not doing his job. He's too busy telling these people about the fact that a doctor somehow thought he might be a girl. I wonder why the doctor thought that. He's explaining that he's not teaching them to read. He's not teaching them science. He's not teaching them math. He's not teaching them the things that he's there for, the purpose of his paycheck, the reason he is there. All of these guys. And, it continues into all of Hollywood. And again, I have to emphasize, it's not that they believe what they're saying. Warner Brothers just censored some gay language from a release of the new Dumbledore movie in China. It's not like they have principles about LGBTQ rights. It is not that. What are they doing? Why? And now their stock is going down. Disney's stock is going down. People are saying we don't want to be part of Disney's agenda. This is all of it is about something other than virtue. It's about something other than politics. It's cynical. First of all, because of civil rights laws, our companies have been put in the position where if they even look bigoted against any kind of minority group, whether it's sexually or in terms of race, if they look, they can be sued. And they can be really deeply penalized. So it is important to them. You ask, well, why don't they serve the conservatives who want to go see Disney? Why don't they Disney movies? Why don't they serve the conservatives who want to watch late night comedy and don't want to be insulted? And the reason is they can get sued for even looking as if they were violating civil rights law, okay? But there's also, of course, the virtue signaling. This is because the churches aren't doing their job, because the churches are trying to make the world a better place instead of teaching you about sin and redemption so that you understand that there is no way for you to be virtuous. The right wing is on the rise. The right wing is on the rise in Europe. We just saw Marine Le Pen have a very good showing against Macron. Viktor Orban was won by a large margin in Hungary. The right is rising here too. I mean, when we look at the polls and they show what's coming down the pike, hopefully, if we don't blow it, which we often do. But there is a real question about which right is rising. In Europe, we have this strongman right. And these are the people who are, like Marine Le Pen, kind of likes Vladimir Putin because she thinks he's a strongman, he's for Christianity. I mean, this is a guy who's bombing maternity hospitals in Ukraine, a Christian country. This is not a bastion of Christianity. But in America, we have a different conservatism. We have a conservatism that is trying to conserve the Constitution. That's our job. That's what we have to do. The culture of freedom that keeps that Constitution alive, the belief in free speech, the belief in a moral order that we have to live in our lives. Rebuilding that culture is our job. We can't do that with strongmen. We can't even do it from the top down. We were talking about that a little bit on Backstage. We can't do it from the top down because it's a contradiction in terms. You can't force people to be free. You can't force people to be moral and keep them free. And yet you need a moral and ultimately religious population to be free. So the job that's facing us is a complicated one. It's a long one. It's a difficult one. It's something that we have to do over time, just like this postmodern left took our institutions apart over time. These guys teaching our children sexual dysfunction, these police officers trying to get the right to do things they don't want to do while letting black supremacists commit terrorist attacks. All of these things that are happening, they happened over time, and we have to take them back over time, and we have to do them on the local level. I think, they talk about the Benedictine option. I think it's more than that. It's federalism. It's keeping our states. It's fighting for our states' rights to create a state in which people want to live because of its moral culture. That's our job. We have to start to do it. We have to take it in hand, and we have to put it ahead of what we like and what we think is the right thing in any given moment, and make sure that we do this over time, because if we don't do our jobs, no one is going to do their job. If you want more Klavan E goodness, like and subscribe. And if you want all the Klavan E goodness, subscribe to my podcast wherever you get your podcasts.